Well, I mean, being a good person, it's a given. You have to be, because I know a lot of not so good people, or actually they're on their journey to becoming a better person, which is that's the way I look at somebody that might not be there yet.
I like that.
Sooner or later, they'll find their way, And they're magnificent musicians, but people just don't want to play with them because, put it this way. If you're in a tour bus and you look around in the tour bus and you don't find the jerk, it's probably you. So don't be the jerk. That is a really interesting question, how to not get lost in a big band situation where you have like really strong front man personalities like Ozzy Osbourne and Kevin DuBrow and Yngwie Malmsteen and many others. I play with in Whitesnake, David Coverdale, one of the most, larger than life singers, because he was the perfect combination of 70s traditional classic metal crossing over into the 80s with MTV, reinvented. Whitesnake was really reinvented, to suit what the marketplace was in the late 80s. Yeah. So how do I stand out? Basically, I look at my contribution as a 100% pie. And if I'm going to play less, I perform more. Let's say if I'm just playing simple parts on the bass, I put the bass on, like on my head or behind my neck, or, I do stuff with it.
Okay.
Things that I picked up when I used to play in clubs growing up, and towards the last sets of the night, because if you were playing in Miami, you would go on like around 10 o'clock at night and not get off until like 4 a.m. Oh, wow. By 4 a.m., you're trying to entertain yourself. Keep from falling asleep, And I would just like play, the songs, over the neck, underneath, behind my back, just to keep myself from falling asleep. Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah. Growing up, I watched a lot of boring shows, and I promised myself, if I'm ever on that big stage, I'm not going to be that boring. Right. So I project myself into the audience a lot of the times.
I like that.
Unless it's an older audience, then I just...
That's right. And I want to be with the young folks.
That's right, with the kids. I want to be with the kids in the audience,
I love it.
Especially in the 80s when I started recording, I went from when I joined Ozzy Osbourne, the Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman records were recorded already. So Tommy Aldridge and I came in the group. Later on, during our touring years with Ozzy, a couple of records came out that Tommy Aldridge and I were on, which one of them was Tribute, which was a live recording with Randy Rhoads. Right. And the other one was Speak of the Devil, which was a Black Sabbath re-recordings. Okay. With Brad Gillis, Tommy Aldridge, and myself, and of course Ozzy. So before I joined Quiet Riot, for the Metal Health version of the band, not the Randy Rhoads version, which I was also a part of, but I'm talking about the Metal Health version. That was kind of like the beginning of thinking, going in the studio with a 80s mentality as far as the production went. Okay. Prior to that, I was playing with Ozzy, which was more of a continuation of what 70s style of playing was, especially for the rhythm section. There's a lot of subtleties and a lot of interesting parts, time changes, rhythm changes, a lot of melody on the bass. That was more of a 70s attitude towards playing.
Interesting.
And then the 80s became more of I kept hearing this a lot. More AC/DC. For some reason, AC/DC became like the watermark of that style. I mean, if you look at, let's say, Def Leppard, which was our coming up in 1983, we both had records at the same time. They had Pyromania, we have Metal Health, and those were kind of like the watermark of what the 80s was to become later on, just because of the success of those two albums, also MTV videos and so on.
Right.
You know, so it became, and also one of the things that really worked for us that as bands, due to MTV, bands started to sell out arenas. And arenas are not really acoustically designed for a lot of playing, you know, music, a lot of notes.
Yeah.
Especially back in the day, they were just designed for sporting events. Now you have all of these bands that are playing a whole lot of notes in these echoey rooms, and you couldn't really hear it. Where actually you felt more of an impact if the band was playing ta, ta, you know what I mean?
Right,
Getting that across, because acoustically, the notes, the sound will carry, and there will not be all this confusion of notes, you know, conflicting with each other. I've been a fan longer than I've been a musician. As a matter of fact, it's because I am a fan that I became a musician.
Yeah.
And also because I was a homely kid, you know, and then I just wanted to attract girls, and I saw the reaction that the Beatles were getting, especially Paul McCartney, and I said, I want that. Really, yeah. You know, I was a kid, so I figured, you know, 5 years from now, I'll be as good as Paul McCartney. And almost 60 years later, I'm still trying to figure out what was he doing. You know, every Beatles song to me is a bass lesson.
Oh,
You know,
wow,
especially the non-Lennon-McCartney written songs, like George Harrison songs. McCartney plays the best stuff on that. You know, like in Something.
Oh, yeah.
That bass line is like, it's a whole orchestral piece, you know. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, Taxman, you know, he played the solo on that, the guitar solo. It's kind of like George would come in, okay, I got this song, okay, but I gotta play everything on it. One of the things that happens from playing so long and having been in the studio with so many different producers and bands and artists, and even when I record on my own, because, you know, people send me tracks, you know, from all over the world, and most of the time there's no ghost bass track, you know, ghost being kind of like, you know, like if you went in the studio and they give you sheet music, it's the same equivalent. You played this. Okay. Or if they send you a ghost track, they'll say, okay, kind of play like this, and then make it your own, you know, which means put your own swing to it or your own feel, you know, maybe add a couple little things here and there. So I start taking the role of a producer, or mostly a reducer, because I want to play more. I want to play, you know, I want to have fun, but then I got to wear also the hat of like, okay, no, you got to play for the song.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that I picked up from all those years of playing and recording and hearing producers say, I really like what you played there. Can you play less? Okay. Adaptation. And maybe I'm saying this because I come from an era that I grew up playing top 40 before I became a professional musician. And then I played top 40, but they happen to be our songs. Which is cool. You know. But prior to that, I was playing anything from, you know, I mean, the extremes of like, you know, You Having My Baby by Paul Anka, and then turning around and doing some Led Zeppelin song that happened to be on the radio, like Whole Lotta Love or Smoke on the Water or something like that. So you ran the gamut, you know, and a lot of R&B, because you're playing dance clubs, and, you know. As a matter of fact, I recall when disco, I was playing in Florida, and I grew up playing in Miami, and made the switch from like top 40 to actual disco playlist. Oh, wow. And the club owner said, if you guys don't play this, you don't have a gig. So we went home and we learned all the disco songs. Oh my goodness, I will have to say the highlight is, for me, will always be the very beginning of my career, you know, given the opportunity to join the Ozzy Osbourne band, thanks to Randy Rhoads, who I had already played with him in Quiet Riot. And when they were looking for a bass player, somebody who would not be a bad influence on Ozzy, if you can imagine that. They were like 10 days away from starting the tour, and Randy kept saying to Ozzy and Sharon, Rudy's the guy, you need him, you know, he's the guy you're looking for. because it wasn't just about playing the music. You know, there were a lot of guys that could do that, but it was also the trust factor that Randy felt that I had, that he knew that I wasn't, you know, gonna be drinking with Ozzy or doing drugs or, you know, be a bad influence or actually show up, do what I was supposed to do, not be a distraction, you know. I was born in Cuba, and growing up in Cuba, we had this, the typical sound of 50s Cuban music was big band, like swing. And this is before rock and roll was invented.
Right, right.
You know, so the influence was, we had a lot of Dizzy Gillespie influence in our music, because Manteca, the Cuban percussionist, you know, joined Dizzy's band, and there was kind of like that Latin jazz fusion that actually came back to Cuba, you know. And it was Dizzy Gillespie was very influential in 50s Cuban music, you know. So I grew up listening to that, because my parents used to take my brother and me to dances, public dances, and, you know, just, and listening to adult music, you know, jazz, you know, Latin jazz. So that sound has always been in my head, and now I'm getting to the point in my life that I can actually, through all the incredible resources we have on YouTube for learning, I can actually explore what the sounds in my head are and learn it every day. I get this bass sits next to me on my couch with a little amplifier. If you want to know what it's like at home, there's me in the sofa with a little amplifier like this, and I'm playing, and my little dog behind me.
Right.
My little Yorkshire Terrier sits right behind me, and I just, and I got my iPhone, I go on YouTube and take lessons and explore the possibilities. So my identity right now is more of a musician than specifically, you know, I'm a bass player, a rock musician.
Yeah.
I am more than that now. And I think I've always been more than that, but it's just kind of like my focus was just basically in rock, because first of all, I didn't have the learning resources back in the 80s as I do now. Yeah. Second of all, I didn't have the opportunities to contribute to other projects around the world as I do now, or we all do, all of us musicians, because of the advantages of technology.
Right.
You know, and so that's what I do every single day, and it makes me very happy. That's the main advice I give to any young musician. Become trustworthy within your network. If you're playing, it doesn't matter, it doesn't even have to be LA. You could be in Tulsa. And among all the musicians that you're playing with, be that trustworthy guy. You know, the guy who's always going to show up for the gig, learn the songs before you get to rehearsal. You know, you're just practicing, and you're not learning the songs at rehearsal.
Right.
You know, the guy who always looks good, takes a shower once. Occasionally. You know, don't be the stinky guy in the bus. Don't be the jerk and the stinky guy in the bus. Yeah, that's right.
That's gonna be the pull quote for the whole interview: shower and learn the song.